So I'm going to be honest with you. Um, this is probably the hardest video I've ever made. In my world as a trainer and as a presence on social media and all that, I've made well over 2,000 videos. This by far is the most challenging video I've ever had to make. To be honest with you, I did not want to make. I don't want to be in this position. But something has happened in my field. Something that it encompasses like racism, bias, privilege, fragility, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Um, and again, I don't want to. This is not something I get excited about, not something I'm comfortable with, but it's something that has to happen. And because it has to happen, I'm willing to do the hard thing and make this very difficult video and share with you what has happened and share with you why it matters. I've been dealing with issues like this for almost my entire career as a psychotherapist. The field of psychotherapy has a very serious race problem, a very serious diversity, equity, and inclusion problem. And even more specifically than that, the community of psychotherapists with which I belong and have functioned within is known as solution-focused brief therapy. And there are solution-focused brief therapists all around the world. And it's a community, it's a culture. And this community has had significant race issues for a very, very long time. And I've been battling those issues for the entirety of my career, up to and including this past weekend. So I want to give you a little bit of history and be very specific about what I'm referring to, and then bring you up to this weekend to talk about what is happening now and why it matters and why I felt compelled to make a video like this. So I want to take you all the way back to 2008. In 2008, I was a recent graduate of a program with my master's degree. I graduated a couple of years before. And I went to my very first conference in the fall of 2008. I had just secured my first book deal, and I was so excited to go to this conference. And there were so many wonderful people. The conference was hosted by an organization called the Solution Focused Brief Therapy Association. Conference was in Austin, Texas, and there were so many of the people that I studied in graduate school, the researchers that I had to cite as I was writing research papers and papers for class, and so many of the authors who had written the books that I had read that helped me fall in love with this solution-focused approach were there, and I got to meet them. And more than that, I realized there was a solution-focused community and that I wanted to be a part of it. So for the next several years, I wanted to be a part of this community in a meaningful way. I wanted to serve on committees. I wanted to serve on the board. I wanted to know what the pathway was from becoming like a new learner to someone that was contributing to this association and the overall culture, the overall community as a whole. And over the years, it became clear to me that they were being welcoming to certain people and putting up significant roadblocks to others, me being one of the people that was experiencing roadblocks. And the association had a board, and it was very not transparent back then. It was you were a board member by invite only, and they didn't talk about what the process was to get on this board, and it was very much an old boys, women's kind of a club. The entirety of the existence of this organization, only white people had served on the board of this organization. And around 2011, a colleague of mine, a guy named Dr. Adam Frower, if you follow me, you've seen him. We train, teach, show up online together all the time. We wrote an email to the Solution Focused Brief Therapy Association board, asking them, what's the issue with Elliott? Leading up to that email, Adam, who was on the research committee at the time, had volunteered to do a project. Adam said Elliott would be a part of the project, and they gave him a list of stipulations, like 12 stipulations. If Elliott's going to be on this project, these 12 stipulations will be in place. And I asked Adam, is that normal? And he said, no, that's just because it's you. So we wrote this email. It's about 5 pages, and we were basically saying, like, not in an accusatory way, but like it feels like Elliott is being singled out. And we're starting to wonder if the reason he's being singled out is the most overt thing that makes him different from everyone else, and that is his race. And I remember we were teaching at the time together in South Lake, Texas, and we were in a hotel room. We wrote this very long email. Actually, it wasn't. We wrote it on a Microsoft Word document. It was 5 pages long. We attached it to this email, and we hit send. And I remember Adam looked at me, and he was like, "You ready?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm ready," because I was so confused at that time. I was so hurt at that time. I was so frustrated at that time. But we sent the email. And shortly thereafter, we got a response back from that email that was 3 sentences long. And the email basically said, if we've ever offended you, we didn't mean to. 3 sentences. 5 pages worth of emails, and we got 3 sentences back. Now, over the years, I would get treatment from people that made it very, very obvious that race was a part of the dynamic. And as my career ascended, it got worse, actually, and the more overt these problems became, the more difficult these problems became. And eventually I stopped going to this association's conference, and I stopped dealing with this association altogether. Just for my own mental health, I needed to separate myself from the way that this organization and their board was treating me. And professionally, I thought it would be better to spend my time doing other things. So I started building my own brand. I started building my own training organization. To be fully honest with you, I didn't have ambition to do that before any of this. I wanted to be a part of their world. I wanted to work with them. I was not someone that wanted to create my own thing, which I ultimately went on to create, and didn't associate with them at all, really. Occasionally, someone would call me or text me, and they would say, so-and-so said this about you, and so-and-so posted this online, and occasionally I would address it, but for the most part, I stayed away and just did my work. And then after several years, they were going to host a conference. I think it was in 2017. They were going to host a conference in Halifax, up in Canada. And a very good friend of mine, I consider him like an older brother. His name is Harvey. I love him. Harvey called me and he told me that he has agreed to do the keynote at this conference. And Harvey, I mean, he's such my guy, man. I was like, Harvey, I'll go to the conference just to support you. And so I went to the conference in Halifax, and I was so nervous to go because of the small but influential. The people that were doing these racist things were board members, and there were people with a long-standing history in this field. There were people who've written books, and there were people who have done significant things. But this was like where they congregated, and I was really nervous to walk into this environment. But I was so excited to see Harvey. Harvey lives in England, and like I said, he's such a close friend. I love him dearly. To this day, I love him dearly. But I'll never forget walking into that conference, and Adam and I walked in. We went and we checked into our rooms, and then we went down to the bar. You know, Adam and I neither one of us drink, but we went down to the bar because oftentimes that's where people of this association congregated. And went down to the bar, and I saw lots of old friends. And one person I saw specifically was this woman named Sarah Smock. Sarah Smock Jordan now. And Sarah Smock is a friend of mine. I loved Sarah. I thought highly of Sarah. Sarah has stayed at my home on several occasions. I had stayed at her home with her and her ex-husband. I was invited to participate in her and her current husband's wedding. I adored Sarah. But a couple of years before this interaction, Sarah was the president of the Solution Focused Brief Therapy Association and was participating in the racist system that was excluding me specifically and people like me. And I saw Sarah at another conference, and I was upset with some of the things that had happened. I remember, I'll never forget, sitting at a bench at a hotel in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Sarah sat down next to me. She said, "Are you mad at me?" And I said, "I love my friend Sarah." This is exactly my exact words. I said, "I loved my friend Sarah, but I'm not sure what I think of President Sarah." And after that conversation, or as we sat there, Sarah said, "After this conference, your friend Sarah is going to give you a call." And I was really touched by that. I was really excited by that. I'm someone for whom friendship matters, like truly matters. And I was excited to hear from Sarah, to reconnect as a friend and understand what had happened professionally while she was serving on this board. She had been on this board for a really long time. In fact, was one of the founding members of this association. But at this moment, when we're having this conversation, she was the president. And I remember telling Adam also knows Sarah really, really well. Adam was one of Sarah's students as he got his PhD at Texas Tech University. And I remember after that conversation, like I was so touched and so excited to reconnect with Sarah. I told Adam, like, I'm so excited to just talk to Sarah. Adam was aware of some of the difficult things that had happened. I'm so excited to just talk to Sarah. And she's going to call me after this conference. And Adam said, "She's never going to call." And I said, "Why not?" He said, she just won't call. But I didn't believe him. I was, "Yeah, of course she'll call. She just told me she would call. I have serious concerns about the way she's conducted herself professionally, but I don't understand what choices she had to make or whatever. And I'm really interested to hear her side. And as a friend and person, I don't have any issues with her. I'm excited to reconnect with my friend." And Adam said, "She's never going to call." Well, sure enough, she didn't call me. The next time I saw her was at this conference in Halifax. When I walked down to the bar and I saw all of these people that I know, including Sarah, and I sat down, and Sarah was overtly and obviously ignoring me. I waved to her. She did not respond. She was intentionally not talking to me. It was very obvious. Adam was with me. She did not talk to him. And it was clear that there was something going on. Later that night, Adam said, "I think Sarah's mad at us." And I said, "How come?" He said, "I don't know, but I think Sarah's mad at us." And I was hurt by that because I would have wanted to talk to Sarah, would have wanted to reconnect with her as a friend. And if something has happened in the same way that I wanted to address what I thought had happened while she was on this board as the president, I would have wanted her to address me, whatever, she's upset with me about. But that didn't happen. What happened next is one of the most racist things that I've ever experienced in this field. When I was a kid growing up, I moved a lot. I was born in the inner city Chicago, moved to inner city Boston. My mother, being wonderful and amazing, wanted her children, to be raised in an environment where they can get good education. So she wanted to move to an area where the schools were better. So my mother moved to suburban Boston in Massachusetts, which was literally 99% white. From that point forward, at almost every school I went to, I was one of only one, maybe two black kids in the whole school. I think the most black kids that were ever in the school while I was present was 3. And as we moved from different schools, what would happen was I would be the new kid at the school, and being kind of a boisterous kid, super energetic, really athletic, funny. Back then girls would think I was cute or whatever. And I would make friends really quickly. Like literally by like the first day of recess, I had a bunch of friends. And then in the cafeteria, I would be sitting and be surrounded by a bunch of friends. And then eventually, like I'd come to school one day and no one's talking to me. And I would find out that the like popular white kids would say to the kids who had befriended me, if you keep being friends with that new black kid, we won't be friends with you anymore, and you won't be invited to our parties. You won't be invited to hang out with us. You won't be one of the cool kids if you keep hanging out with that new black kid. And they would choose to disassociate with me so that they could preserve their status at the school. That's a very common thing that happens in the dynamics of race. It's a very, very common thing. Like, I'm sure you've seen movies or read stories about a white woman falling in love with a black guy, and she tells her family, and they say things like, if you continue in this relationship, we're going to disown you, and you're going to be written out of the will or whatever. That's a very common dynamic. If you continue to associate with the black person, you're going to experience a consequence that we're going to give to you. That's a common thing. It's a hurtful thing, but I mean, it goes back centuries. I mean, this is part of what happens in this dynamic between black people and the racist system with which we are confronted with so frequently. And here we are at this conference in Halifax. Adam and I had just interacted with Sarah and felt like she's mad at us. Later on during the conference, Adam, he went his way to attend whatever workshops he was attending, and I went my way to attend whatever workshops I was attending. And I'll never forget, ever, man, I'll never forget. When the workshops ended, I reconvened with Adam, and he said, well, Sarah's not mad at us. She's mad at you. And I said, how do you know? And he said, I was just in her workshop. And when I walked into the room, Sarah walked from the front of the stage, from the front of the room where she was presenting. She walked all the way around to the back, and she gave me a hug. And she said, be careful who you're associating with. People are starting to notice that you are linking yourself with Elliott. And if you continue to do that, you're going to lose opportunities in this field. If you continue to do that, you're going to, you might not like what happens. That old tactic that white people use all the time to maintain the status quo. When Adam was telling me that, it hurt. It really, really hurt. Because remember, I came to this conference expecting to reconnect with Sarah. I love Sarah. Again, she's been in my home. I have treated her as a host. I've shown her around the city in which I live. I have visited her home. And this couldn't have been more of a difference from what I expected would happen when I went to this conference. But here I am, faced with the reality, like it is what it is. The rest of the conference was hard. The rest of the conference was really hard. I got to hang out with Adam, and I got to hang out with Harvey, the whole reason I was there. But I also was made even more aware of the racial divide within the solution-focused world. The board of this association would often describe it as a divide between Elliott Connie and this association. But it really was a racial divide because I didn't know them personally. They had an issue with me because I was different. They had an issue with me because of the way I walk, talk, act, and dress. They had a difference with me because of my culture, and they had a difference with me because of my race. And I decided I would never go to this conference again. By this time, my organization was the largest solution-focused training organization in the world, still is. I have the largest following in this field, still do. I didn't need them. And I decided I was not going to associate with this organization ever again. But then in the early parts of 2020, something tragic happened that changed the world. Certainly changed the world in terms of race relations and race dynamics. And I'm not talking about the pandemic, actually. I'm talking about something that happened shortly thereafter, which was the tragic murder of George Floyd. Not all of you guys can remember back in that time, but when George Floyd was murdered, it created an environment of communication between Black people and non-Black people, specifically white people, that I had never seen before. We were listening to each other differently after George Floyd's murder than we were ever listening before. For the first time in my life, I was watching white people call out other white people for their racist behaviors. And it was refreshing. It wasn't nice or good because it's such a difficult topic and it happened because such a tragic thing happened. But it was refreshing to see people listening to each other in that way. And around this time, the then president of the Solution-Focused Brief Therapy Association, a woman named Monica Rotner, reached out to me and asked me if I would do a lecture at the conference that year. It was going to be happening in November of 2020. Because of the pandemic, it would be online, and Monica reached out to me via email, and I said no. I will not do it because of my history and experiences with this organization. Some of the people that I had had some difficult interactions with were still on that board, and I didn't want any part of it. And I thought about my grandmother, to be honest with you. I thought about the strength my grandmother had, and she had passed away a few years before this, and I thought about my mission and purpose. I thought about fighting racism, and I thought about contributing to the conversation, whether I was comfortable with it or not. And I reached back out to Monica, asked her if we could talk on the phone, and Monica and I talked on the phone. I'll never forget, when I'm really stressed out on a phone call, I pace. If anybody knows me, you'll know that I pace when I'm in a deep, sensitive conversation. So I went outside in my driveway and paced as I talked to Monica. And I told Monica I would do it. I would address the conference. It wasn't necessarily a keynote, but it was me talking to the whole conference as opposed to a workshop when you talk to the people who just attended your workshop. But I said I have some stipulations. And Monica asked what they were, and I told her, I want a diversity statement on your website. I don't remember what they were now, but there's something like 10. There are 10 things I would need this association to address, because I don't want to feel like the token Black guy that you guys are hiring just because George Floyd has been murdered. I want to feel like this is a step in a new direction. And Monica got back to me and she said, the board agrees and we will do it. And I agreed to do this lecture at this conference a few months later. When the conference came, by that time we'd been doing Zoom stuff for 6 to 7 months, and I was sitting at my desk and everybody's in their little mini screens. And I did my lecture about solution-focused brief therapy, blah, blah, blah. And they were going to do elections for the board of the Solution-Focused Brief Therapy Association. Over the course of time, back when I originally started having issues with this board, they did not have elections. You were just appointed, and they just were appointing their friends that thought like them, behaved like them, looked like them, culturally were them, acted like them. But by this time, in 2020, they had changed the bylaws and they now had to have open elections. And they were going to have an election on Zoom. And I attended this meeting because I wanted to see who was going to be elected to the new board. And I'll never forget, man, I was sitting at my desk and Adam, who was also in Zoom, I was in Texas where I live, he was in Georgia where he lived. Adam sent me a text message and he said, "What are you going to do if you get nominated for this election?" the way it worked is you had to be nominated, and then they took all the people that were nominated, then they had a vote. And he said, what are you going to do if you're nominated? And I laughed. I scoffed. I'm not going to be nominated for this, Adam. Are you crazy? Like, this is the last group on earth that would nominate. I'm literally here because I just want to see what happens. And then Adam's a super genius and a bit of a smart ass. And Adam sent me a text message back and he said, they're going to nominate you. And sure enough, they did. Someone in the room said, I nominate Elliott Connie. Do we have a second? Elliott Connie is now nominated. And I thought, what do I do? I just sat there. I sat there for like 30 seconds. And I thought, what do I do? What do I do here? And in that moment, I decided to accept the nomination. And they were electing like 3 people. There were like 8 people nominated. And the 8 of us had to say like what we intended we would do for this community. And I said, I will address the diversity, equity, and inclusion. I said, I will fight to promote solution-focused brief therapy, but I will fight to make it accessible and inclusive to all people. I remember saying that. And I got voted onto the board, which I thought was incredible. Like, here's this organization that I've been having these issues with for now over a decade, and I've just been nominated and elected onto their board. I began to serve on the Solution Focused Brief Therapy Association board in January of 2021. That election happened in the fall of November, and my position actually started in January of 2021. I was excited about it, but it was really surreal to me. I was scared. Like, here I am now on the board of the organization that actively tried to exclude me, not just from this board, but from this field. They actually tried to end my career on multiple occasions. And here I am serving on this board. And it's been a journey. It's been a journey. And now I want to bring you, now that you have all that history, I want to bring you up to this weekend and what has happened recently. Because I wish I could tell you that in this time that we have done a lot to eradicate racist, privileged, biased behavior. But I learned this weekend we haven't. And that's devastating, to be honest. Because what happened this weekend is I had another interaction with Sarah that leaves me hurt, that leaves me impacted, that leaves me needing to respond. As a board member, part of my responsibility is to work with the person that is planning or hosting the next conference. And that going into 2022 was Sarah Smock Jordan. The reason she was one of the reasons that she was the host of this upcoming conference was because she was supposed to be the host in 2020 when everything went online due to the pandemic. So we pushed it to 2021. The conference was going to be in Las Vegas, the city in which she lives. And then in 2021, it got pushed to 2022. So Sarah has been working for 3 years, really, in preparation for the event going back face to face, and the city in which it would be going to would be Nevada, Las Vegas. But by that time, the board had changed. Not only did they add me, but they added lots of other people over the course of those 3 years. And going into 2022, we had participated in several meetings with Sarah to plan this conference. And multiple members on the board experienced Sarah as being incongruent. As a board, we have to vote on things on how the organization will be run. And as part of what we were doing is we had changed several things. Some of those changes were just structural changes we thought were more appropriate given how the world was functioning at the time. Other of those changes we thought were appropriate to address the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues that have been a part of this field for a very long time. And during these planning meetings, multiple planning meetings that I attended 3. And during the first 2, Sarah would routinely say something like, I understand that the board is making changes, but I'm concerned about this, this, and this. Or she would say, it's totally fine, I understand the board's making changes, totally fine, but I'm concerned about this, this, and this. She continued to say it, and multiple people on the board would voice, because we're constantly talking about the things that are making her anxious and uncomfortable, we're not getting things done that we need to properly move forward to this conference, like deciding a menu and the agenda for the conference and all that stuff. Some of the changes we made included changing the date and the way we did registration, and changing the date and the way we did call for proposals, things that are within our remit as a board, but they were things that made Sarah very obviously uncomfortable. And caused some frustration amongst the board, because certain things needed to change in order to make the field more equitable, more diverse, and more inclusive. So during this third meeting, I went to 2 of these meetings, and then this third meeting comes up, and Sarah continues to do this. I know the board is making some changes, which is totally fine, but I have some concerns. But in this meeting, she went a step further, and she said, I'm concerned that we're going to be sued and I'm going to be liable, because if we don't do what we say we're going to do, we're going to be in a legal issue. And I said, Sarah, what are we doing that would put us in some sort of a legal issue, and who would be the one suing? She never really answered that question, but she did make it clear that she was afraid that the venue would not like these changes. And she actually said, I need the board to write me a letter that says I was not a part of these changes. And I like, this is now to the point of ridiculous. And I said, Sarah, we're not going to do that. Like, you're not in line of any legal liabilities. You aren't on the board. So if anybody's going to sue this organization, they're going to be suing people on the board, which does not include you. And you're not on the contract between us and the venue in Las Vegas. This is about placating your anxiety. And I very sternly told her it was ridiculous and we weren't going to do it. Very sternly. Curse words, very sternly. And the meeting went on, and that was that. I later learned, well, actually, I'll get to that part in a second. The following day, Sarah resigned from the board, and I had a conversation with someone who said Sarah feels like I was, trying to think of the word, shutting her down as a woman. She felt like I was mistreating her as a woman, which is an accusation that I don't even care to defend. It's so ridiculous and not in line that at the time in which I heard it, which was the day after this meeting, I was like, that's ridiculous. I don't have any desire or care to defend that or explain myself, because I knew exactly why I was saying what I was saying, and I stand by it now, and I stood by it then, so that's ridiculous. What has happened this weekend is this board has decided that because of the world that we live in, the pandemic is still the pandemic, monkeypox is now a thing, we're in the middle of a recession, there's a war going on in Europe, which actually is more of an invasion than it is a war going on in Europe. We've decided that once again, we're not going to host the conference in Nevada, Las Vegas. We're going to move it online. And as an association, we sent an email out to everybody letting them know about this change. Now, that meeting that I just told you about, where I very sternly addressed Sarah's request, happened in March. The email that we sent out was in early August, literally this past Friday. And Sarah responded to being notified that the conference was being moved online in a way that I now feel the need to address. She responded by saying that she found it sad to deal with the board, and she feels like she was mistreated as a woman. And she would like to talk to the board, and she would like to talk to the DE&I committee, which is a committee that this current board established, and she wants to talk to them about how she was treated as a woman. And I need to address this because this has now crossed a line into white fragility, and this has now crossed the line into danger. Because she is not taking into account her behavior. She's only considering that she was addressed and called out by a black man, and now she has to counter that and make an excuse for that, as if the big bad black man is somehow mistreating her. And I need to address this, and I need to address this publicly for a couple of reasons. The first is because in Sarah's email, she said to share this with the board of the Solution Focused Brief Therapy Association, with the members of the Solution Focused Brief Therapy Association, which is not clearly really defined, and etc. And I absolutely think we should share this, because this is an opportunity to talk about what racist behavior looks like in 2022. You know, in the 1950s, racist behavior looked like protesting a school when a young black girl was trying to attend a newly desegregated school. It was in the 50s that happened. In the 60s, racist behavior looked like shooting black people with fire hoses. In the 80s, when I was growing up, racist behavior looks like, don't let that black kid come over my house. Growing up in Massachusetts, I can't tell you how many times parents wouldn't let me play with their children because I was black. But in 2022, this is what it looks like. In 2022, it looks like an opportunity to demonize a black man using his voice appropriately, given the position he was in, and almost weaponizing your whiteness to try to make it sound like it was something other than what it was. So Sarah's now writing this email saying, Elliott mistreated me as a woman. Other white women, 2 other white women who were at this meeting, contacted Sarah, and in their fragility said, Elliott was, over talking you. And like I said, I have no desire to address that because it is so utterly ridiculous. But I will say this. I was raised by really strong, powerful black women who taught me to respect women every day of my life in every interaction. So even if you look at the structure of my company, almost all of the employees in positions of leadership are women. Women of color, but I have literally put women in positions of leadership in my organization. My conference has routinely held women up. And I do that because I was raised by really strong, powerful women, powerful black women that taught me to respect women and taught me to respect the perspective of women. That's how I was raised. So to accuse me of shutting you down as a woman, it's disrespectful to the people who have raised me, and I will not tolerate it. Because the truth is, not only did those women teach me to respect women, they also taught me to fight racism. So while Sarah wants to use her privilege to say Elliott was being a big bad man, mistreating me as a woman, what Elliott was actually doing was addressing your advocation for a racist system that we as a board were fighting to change. And I was in every one of my rights to confront that, and to confront it exactly how I did. Looking back, if I could go back to that meeting back in March, I wouldn't change a single thing. I had sat through multiple meetings watching Sarah advocate for the racist system that she was used to. Because the simple truth is, Sarah is a founding member of the Solution Focused Brief Therapy Association. She's a longtime board member and had served as president. No one in our entire field participated more or benefited from more than Sarah Smock Jordan. And now all of the changes that we are making as a board, and we're making them appropriately, we're making them within our remit of our positions, Sarah is fighting them and saying, I want no part of this. I think you guys are changing things, which is fine, but here are my concerns. I have no problem at all addressing someone who is advocating for a system that excludes people and addressing them exactly how I did. You know, there is this myth, or stereotype actually, about like the angry black man. And I recently was in an interaction with a white man who said, Elliott, you need to not perpetuate the stereotype of angry black men. And it offended me greatly, actually, because the stereotype of the angry black man is actually not promoted by black people. The stereotype of the angry black man exists because a passionate, articulate, intense black man being passionate and articulate and intense is perceived as angry, which is really, really scary. So thus you're mistreating me because I'm a woman. But the truth is, I'm a passionate guy. You guys have watched my videos. Go look at my YouTube channel. I'm a really passionate and enthusiastic guy, and I apologize for it zero. And I was passionate and enthusiastic in my addressing of Sarah, and I do not apologize for it. I have been passionate and enthusiastic my entire life, and I've been passionate and enthusiastic in addressing many men in this field. So when Sarah makes that specific accusation, I don't actually give a shit. It offends me because you are now disrespecting my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt. And for that, I have to tell you, you don't get to do that. I was addressing you as a racist. I was addressing you as an advocate for a racist system from which you have benefited for a very long time. And as things were changing, you were noticeably, obviously uncomfortable, which is okay. Change is uncomfortable, especially this. But I have no problem whatsoever reminding you that these changes are happening. And just as I said in that meeting, Sarah, stop saying this. You're either on board with the changes or you are not, but stop saying, I understand you guys are making these changes, which is okay, but I have these concerns. Either respect our authority as a board to make these changes or not. The next day, she chose to resign. And now, all these months later, after hearing that the conference will not be happening in her city, she responds by making this accusation, and she defends that accusation by saying other women said they saw the same thing. Sarah, I don't care. When I agreed to serve on this board, I did so to change the culture of racial inclusion and equity. When I decided to accept the nomination and the vote to be on this board, I was put in as vice president. I did so to advocate for racial inclusion and diversity in this field. And I don't give a shit how you or anyone else feels about the way I do that job. I just don't care. I am here for a very specific reason, and I'm doing that very specific role, and I could not care less what you and the other fragile people think about how I'm doing that job. You just don't matter to me. It's not relevant to me. Sarah, the simple truth is, during that meeting, you made a ridiculous request for a ridiculous reason. And as a professional in this field, I get to address that. You asked for this board to write you a letter that says you were not a part of these changes to protect yourself from a lawsuit that was not coming, and even if it were to come, you would not be a part of. Sarah, I get to address that. I get to address what that stands for. I get to address what that means. And as I just said, I don't give a shit about how you or anybody else thinks about how I do my job as an advocate for social justice, racial inclusion, and diversity in this field. I learned today before I made this video, and as I said, this is by far the hardest video I've ever had to make. I do not want to make this video. That Sarah reached out to the current president of the Solution Focused Brief Therapy Association Board, a woman that I am very proud to be serving with, a woman named Amanda Bushek, and asked, I don't want to be contacted if I'm going to be attacked. And Sarah, I think you're confusing attack with disagreed with. I think you're confusing attacked with educated. I think you don't understand the difference. But you're doing the things that racists do. Like, you sent a text message to Amanda with a screenshot of something I posted on Facebook to say, like, look, he's attacking me. Look at the big bad black guy. And Sarah, you just don't get to demonize me in that way without being addressed. I'm not attacking you, Sarah. If you want the honest God truth, I love you. I don't want to do this. I valued our friendship for years, but you seem to have gone in another direction and think that I'm not going to address it. And I am, every single time. Whether I want to or not, doesn't matter to me. Sarah, I want nothing more than for this community to be close. I want this community to be what it says it is, which is equitable, welcoming, open-armed. Sarah, when you sent that email to the board, you said, share this with everyone. And I think this is a very good opportunity to show the world this is what privilege being weaponized looks like in 2022. And this is what we will not tolerate within a kind and just community. I don't want to make videos like this, and I certainly don't want to address things like this publicly. Sarah, when I got this message, I was on vacation in Miami. I had just gotten off of a speedboat. I don't want to address this, and I don't feel I should have to. I don't feel like the accusations you are making towards me are fair. But I'm going to address it, and I'm going to address it every single time because these learning opportunities are important. If we are going to have a community that is welcoming and open and brilliant and compassionate, then we also have to have standards. And we have to hold each other accountable to those standards. And we have to be able to talk about and call out these behaviors when they show up. I get that this is uncomfortable. I get that this is not easy for me to make. I assume it's not easy for you to watch. I assume it's not easy for any of you to watch. But it's real. And if we're going to have a world where we say that equity, diversity, and inclusion matter, then we have to have a world when we're willing to call it out. I'm very open to a conversation with you, Sarah. I'm very open to a conversation with you publicly. Like we can do a Zoom and invite the whole world. I've got hundreds of thousands of followers, Sarah. Like we can invite them all. I'll do a Facebook Live. Sarah, you want to know the crazy truth is I still miss my friend. I still miss that woman that I met all those years ago when you came to my area to give a lecture at University of Texas at Arlington, and I got to meet you and your then husband, Steve. I still miss my friend. I just don't know what the fuck happened to her. Maybe you were this person the whole time and I didn't see it. But I don't know what happened. So Sarah, I'm going to end this video by saying, I love you. I hope that you will analyze your behavior. I hope you will think about your pattern of behavior throughout this time. And if you're open to having a conversation, I'm open to have a conversation as well. And for all of you in the solution-focused community, thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for trusting me in this position of leadership, not just on this board, but also in the community as I have built the training organization that I have and the social media platforms and all those things. Like, I love you guys. Like, you mean everything to me. And I thank you so much for taking the time to allow me to share with you and giving me the space to have these hard conversations about these hard moments. Because it can't go unchecked if we expect to have an inclusive community. And that's the only reason that I'm here.